Imagine it is dawn in Tenochtitlan, the beating heart of the Aztec Empire, a city so magnificent that Spanish chroniclers would later call it the Venice of the New World. The first faint light of morning filters across the eastern horizon, painting the sky with streaks of rose and gold. The air is still cool, crisp from the night, but already alive with faint sounds. Water lapping against the edges of canals, the distant calls of traders arriving with goods, the shrill cry of exotic birds waking with the sun. You open your eyes inside a modest Aztec home, a one-room dwelling built of sun-dried bricks and covered with a reed roof. The floor beneath you is hard-packed earth, swept clean by the woman of the house the night before. There is no bed, no cushiony mattress to soften your rest. Instead, you slept on a simple woven reed mat called a petlatl, laid flat upon the floor. It provided a little comfort, and your back aches slightly from the firmness, but for an Aztec commoner, this is normal. Nobles and warriors might have more elaborate bedding, but for you, the day begins in stiffness. The room smells faintly of smoke from last night's fire, which still lingers as a dark smudge on the walls. Along one corner rests a clay brazier where your family cooks meals and warms water. A few household tools, clay pots, a grinding stone, baskets woven from reeds, are neatly arranged. There is no excess, no clutter. Everything has a function, and everything is watched carefully, for in an Aztec household, wastefulness is frowned upon. Before you can even stretch fully awake, responsibilities are already waiting. In Aztec society, life is guided by the principle of tlatzoli, meaning both disorder and filth. Dirt and chaos are seen as dangerous, not only physically, but spiritually. To wake and ignore your duties would be to allow imbalance into the home. And so, as dawn light spills across the reed mats, the first task is cleansing. The woman of the household begins sweeping immediately, driving dust and debris out the door with a palm broom. Sweeping is more than cleanliness, it is a sacred act, pushing away evil influences and uninvited spirits. You too are expected to rise quickly, no matter your age, and begin helping. Children fetch water from the canal outside, carrying it in clay jugs balanced on their backs. Adults prepare for the day's labors, grinding maize on the metate to make masa for tortillas, or mending fishing nets to carry to the lake. There is no leisurely lying in bed, no soft pause between waking and working. The city itself is stirring alongside you. Imagine stepping outside your home into the early light. The streets are narrow earthen paths that wind between canals and houses. Bridges span waterways and canoes glide silently along, ferrying fishermen, merchants, and early travelers. To the east, the great twin temples, dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, god of the sun and war, and Tlaloc, god of rain, rise above the city like mountains of stone, their steps already catching the glow of the dawn. Priests climb them barefoot, their white robes fluttering as they prepare morning offerings to ensure that the sun itself continues to rise. For in Aztec belief, the sun does not rise automatically. It must be fed, nourished by sacrifice and prayer. The air fills with sound. Women pound maize into flour with rhythmic grinding, their stones echoing like a heartbeat across the neighborhoods. Vendors call out from canoes filled with chilies, tomatoes, and herbs. The shrill whistle of a conch shell sounds from the great plaza, summoning workers to gather for instructions. The city, with its 200,000 souls, is awake, a hive of purpose and ritual. But waking up in Tenochtitlan is not easy for someone from the modern world. There is no glass of cool water waiting, no toothbrush, no coffee. The water you might drink from the canals would sicken you unless boiled or drawn from aqueducts. Hygiene exists, but in forms unfamiliar. Obsidian blades to scrape away dirt, lime paste to clean teeth, sweat baths known as temazcal to purge the body. The smells around you are strong: wood smoke, maize dough, fish from the lake, and the human press of thousands of bodies stirring at once. And then comes the pressure. In the Aztec world, time is not your own. From the moment you wake, your life is structured by duty. Men are expected to labor for their family's survival, farming chinampas, the floating gardens built upon the lake, or hauling goods for trade. Women are expected to grind maize, weave cloth, tend children, and prepare food. Children as young as 4 or 5 are given tasks, carrying wood, fetching water, learning the discipline of labor. To do nothing is shameful. Laziness is punished, sometimes even beaten out of children by stern parents determined to raise obedient and industrious adults. And even your very breath feels tied to something greater. Every sunrise is sacred, for it means the gods have once again allowed the sun to return. To live in the Aztec world is to feel constantly watched, constantly reminded that your life belongs not just to your family or to your community, but to the gods themselves. And every day begins with that weight pressing upon your shoulders. You do not live for yourself, but for the survival of the world. You stretch your stiff back, rub sleep from your eyes, and look around this bustling, fragrant, disciplined city. The day is only beginning, but you already understand. You are far from home, and if you hope to survive even a single day in the Aztec Empire, you must rise with purpose, act with discipline, and remember that even the simple act of waking carries with it cosmic responsibility. The sun has only just begun its climb over the Valley of Mexico, and already the Aztec morning unfolds with ritual precision. If waking up in Tenochtitlan felt like a jolt into another world, the next steps, washing, dressing, and preparing for the day, reveal just how different survival here truly is. You begin with cleanliness. For the Aztecs, hygiene is not a luxury, but an expectation. Yet it looks nothing like what you know. There are no porcelain basins filled with warm water, no soap foaming in fragrant lather, no toothbrush lined neatly on a bathroom shelf. Instead, you walk to the edge of the canal, where cold, clear water drawn from aqueducts built by ingenious engineers ripples softly in the morning light. From a small clay bowl, you scoop water into your hands and splash it onto your face. It shocks you with its chill, but the Aztecs believed this cold purification is a way of waking not only the body, but the spirit. Nearby, a woman chews a twig of chicolote plant and scrubs her teeth with the fibrous end. Others use a powder of ground charcoal and salt to scour their mouths. The gritty sensation is harsh but effective, keeping breath fresh in a society where food is spiced with chilies and garlic and where everyone lives in close quarters. You mimic the motion, your gums protesting, but this is how the Aztecs begin their day. Bathing is frequent in this empire. Spanish chroniclers would later marvel and sometimes complain that the Aztecs bathe more than Europeans. Steam baths, known as temazcal, are a regular part of life, combining steam, heat, and herbs to purge both body and spirit. Imagine stepping inside a low, stone-walled hut heated by hot rocks. Water is poured over them, filling the chamber with thick, wet steam, while an attendant fans the air with fragrant herbs. The sweat pours from your skin, loosening dirt, opening pores, and, according to Aztec thought, releasing the impurities of the soul. You stumble out, dizzy but renewed, cleansed in a way that feels more ritual than practical. Clothing, too, is a ritual. For common men, the morning means fastening a simple maxlatol, a loincloth of woven cotton or maguey fiber tied securely around the waist. Over it, you might drape a cloak called a tilmatli, knotted at the shoulder. For women, the day begins with a long, sleeveless tunic called a huipiyi, often embroidered with geometric patterns, and a skirt known as a quait. Shoes are optional for commoners, but nobles slip into sandals of leather or woven fiber. These garments are more than protection against the elements, they are symbols of order. Cloth is precious in this world, woven by women at the household loom, thread by thread, sometimes taking months to complete a single garment. To wear it carelessly or neglect it would dishonor both the gods and the weaver's labor. Each garment reflects your status. Nobles wear brightly dyed cotton, fringed and embroidered, while commoners make do with plain maguey fiber. Warriors wear cloaks marked by feathers or patterns that display their battlefield achievements, broadcasting their valor in vivid threads. As you dress, you are reminded that appearance itself is a kind of offering. The Aztecs believed the gods demanded order and cleanliness from their people, and neglecting personal hygiene was an insult to divine order. Hair is combed and often cut short for men, while women braid theirs neatly, sometimes adorning it with ribbons or flowers. Elders remind children that a disheveled appearance invites mockery, and worse, it signals laziness, a spiritual failing in a society where hard work is the greatest virtue. The household fire is rekindled, its smoke curling toward the reed roof. This act is not simply for cooking, it is a quiet ritual, a reminder of the household gods who guard the family. Women grind maize on the metate, their movements steady and practiced, producing the masa that will feed everyone throughout the day. The sound of grinding stones fills the air like a drumbeat, steady and grounding. The smell of fresh maize, warm and nutty, rises as tortillas begin to cook on clay griddles called comali. You sit cross-legged on the floor, accepting a tortilla hot from the fire. It is plain, without fillings, but nourishing. Alongside it is a cup of atole, a warm maize porridge sweetened with honey or flavored with chili. Breakfast is not indulgence here, it is fuel. Every bite is tied to the labor that awaits, and to the cosmic responsibility of sustaining the sun through the strength of the people. Before leaving the house, a prayer is murmured. Children bow their heads while parents thank the gods for life, for food, and for another sunrise. Small offerings, crumbs of tortilla, drops of atole, are placed in the hearth fire or scattered outside, gifts for the unseen beings who share the household space. It is a gesture of humility, a reminder that nothing belongs to you alone. As you step outside, your body cleansed, your clothing tied, and your stomach warmed with maize, the city of Tenochtitlan surrounds you. The canals glitter in the morning sun, lined with chinampas, floating gardens lush with green maize stalks, beans, and squash. The air vibrates with life. Canoes paddling, women calling out greetings, dogs barking, priests chanting faintly in the distance. The morning rituals have ended, but the demands of the day have only just begun. You realize quickly that in the Aztec Empire, nothing is casual. Washing, dressing, eating, all are imbued with meaning. To skip these steps would not only shame you, but risk angering the gods, disrupting the delicate balance that holds the world together. Even the simplest act of scrubbing your teeth with a twig feels immense, a thread woven into the vast tapestry of life, labor, and worship. And as you watch the sun climb higher above the eastern mountains, you understand that here, every morning is both ordinary and divine. Survival is not simply about work or food, it is about honoring the gods in every breath, every garment, every crumb. In the Aztec world, hygiene and ritual are the same thing. To live is to serve, to wake is to prepare. And from the moment the day begins, you are already bound to the empire in body and spirit. Imagine waking as a child in the Aztec Empire. You are not yet strong enough to be a warrior or skilled enough to be a weaver, but from the very moment your small body stirs awake on a woven reed mat, the expectations of the empire already weigh on you. Childhood here is no gentle meadow of play. It is a training ground, a proving stage, a place where obedience, discipline, and labor are forged into the bones of the next generation. From your earliest years, you belong less to yourself and more to your family, your kaupuli, the neighborhood clan, and beyond that, to the empire itself. Aztec society has no room for idleness. Children are precious, yes, but only insofar as they grow into useful adults who can feed the sun, serve the gods, and labor for the glory of Tenochtitlan. A newborn's path begins with ceremony. When you were an infant, your umbilical cord was buried in a way that set your fate. Boys' cords were placed near the battlefield, signaling their destiny as warriors. Girls' cords were buried beneath the hearth, tying them forever to domestic duty. From the moment you drew breath, your future was already carved by ritual. As a toddler, you are introduced to labor by imitation. Boys trail after their fathers to fields or chinampas, learning how to plant maize seedlings or carry water. Girls sit beside their mothers at the grinding stone, watching as calloused hands knead dough and weave threads on a loom. Your toys are miniature tools, tiny weaving kits, little reed bows, clay cooking vessels. Play and labor blur together until they become one. By the time you're 5, discipline begins in earnest. The Aztecs hold nothing back when it comes to correcting children. Parents believe that a child uncorrected will grow wild and disrupt the cosmic balance, angering the gods and dishonoring the family. Discipline is harsh. A lazy child might have cactus spines pressed into their skin as a sting of shame. Disobedience could earn a child the punishment of being forced to inhale acrid chili smoke, eyes watering as the lesson burned into both lungs and memory. These punishments sound cruel to you and me, but to the Aztecs they were necessary corrections, painful but vital, shaping the child into a vessel of strength and obedience. Schooling is universal, one of the marvels of Aztec society. Unlike many ancient civilizations, education here is not reserved for nobles. By the time you are 7, you are sent to school, regardless of wealth or gender. For commoners, this means the Telposh-Kali, the House of Youth. Here, boys are drilled in basic skills, agriculture, craftsmanship, the carrying of loads, and, above all, obedience to authority. Their nights are filled with chores and lessons. Girls are taught in the home rather than a separate school, but their training is no less rigorous. Weaving, cooking, grinding maize until their arms ache, raising siblings, and maintaining order in the household. For the sons of nobles, the path leads to the Kalmakak, the school of the elite. Here, the demands are sharper. Boys are trained as priests, scribes, leaders, and generals. They rise before dawn to sweep temple courtyards, grind maize for offerings, and memorize long passages of hymns and ritual chants. Punishment is strict and unrelenting. If you are lazy, the priests might pierce your skin with maguey thorns or force you to sleep outside in the cold, denied food until obedience is restored. Girls of noble birth also receive higher training. They learn ritual songs, ceremonial dances, and sometimes priestly duties, preparing to become the mothers of warriors, or even, in rare cases, priestesses themselves. Their daily tasks blend devotion with duty, each thread woven into the endless fabric of empire. What strikes you most is the relentlessness. Childhood here has no extended softness, no long days of leisure. Even games, ball games played with rubber balls, contests of strength and agility, serve as preparation for adult life. To stumble is to learn endurance. To win is to honor your family. There are no idle victories. And behind it all looms the shadow of sacrifice. Children are taught early that life is not their own to keep. They learn the myths of gods who bled to bring the sun into motion, and they're told that they too may one day be called to give blood, labor, or even life itself to keep the universe alive. This knowledge settles deep into the marrow of every boy and girl, shaping even their laughter, their chores, their first lessons at dawn. Imagine yourself as an Aztec child rising from your mat to begin another day. Your hands are sore from yesterday's chores, your stomach aches from a small meal, but you are expected to work, to learn, to endure. The voice of your parents is firm, the expectations of your teachers sharper still. There is love, yes, but it is love wrapped in discipline, shaped by fear of cosmic imbalance. You realize quickly there is no such thing as freedom in childhood here. There is only preparation. For you, a visitor from a modern world, it feels suffocating. But for the Aztecs, it was life. Children were the threads that held the tapestry of the empire together, woven tight from the moment they could walk until the day they were strong enough to carry the empire on their backs. Childhood was not escape from responsibility. It was responsibility's beginning. And in this world, if you faltered as a child, you risked being broken before you had even begun. The Aztec Empire did not run on gold or tribute alone. It ran on sweat. Every street of Tenochtitlan, every chinampa floating on the shallow waters of the lakes, every pyramid rising into the sky, was built not just by the hands of nobles or kings, but by the labor of ordinary men, women, and children. To live in this empire was to work, unceasingly, relentlessly, with your body pressed into service from sunrise until the last light of day flickered out. Imagine opening your eyes in a small reed hut on the edge of the great city. Dawn has barely begun, the horizon glowing faintly pink above the lake, but already you hear the stir of movement. Your family rises at first light because time is precious and food scarce. A single wasted hour is a lost meal, a lost harvest, a punishment waiting to happen. For men of common birth, labor begins in the fields. You take up a wooden hoe, its blade edged with obsidian, and wade into the chinampas, artificial islands painstakingly built by hand from mud and reeds. The air is damp, alive with mosquitoes. Your feet sink into the muck as you bend to plant maize, beans, and squash, the holy trio of crops that sustain the empire. These chinampas are miracles of engineering, but to you they are endless toil. You weed, you water, you haul heavy baskets of silt to renew the soil. Your back bends like a bow, your hands crack and blister, but there is no rest. Others labor in the forests, chopping wood for fuel in construction. The empire consumes endless timber, beams for homes, fuel for cooking fires, and poles to shore up canals. Still others drag stones for building projects. Imagine hauling slabs of volcanic rock across rough ground, barefoot, sweating under the sun, your muscles trembling as overseers bark orders. The temples that gleam with white stucco, the palaces that echo with noble voices, all are carved from the exhaustion of commoners. Women's work is no lighter. From the moment they rise, they labor without pause. The grinding stone, metate, is their constant companion. Each day, maize kernels are soaked, rinsed, and then ground by hand into fine flour. The work is brutal. Kneeling on stone, pressing and pulling with a heavy mano, the muscles of the arms and back ache endlessly. This grinding consumes hours each day, a labor so constant that women's bones, even centuries later, show deep grooves of wear. After grinding, women pat tortillas by hand, tend to clay pots bubbling with beans, fetch water from canals, and weave cloth from maguey fibers or cotton. Weaving is not leisure, it is obligation. Every woman, from the humblest farmer's daughter to the emperor's wife, is expected to weave. Tribute is often paid not only in food but in cloth, and failure to produce enough could mean punishment for the entire household. Imagine the sound of countless looms creaking across the empire, threads tightening into endless garments, banners, and offerings. Children, too, are caught in this net of labor. By the time they are 5 or 6, they are expected to fetch firewood, carry water, or scare birds from crops. They learn quickly that laziness is not tolerated. A child who shirks chores might be pricked with maguey thorns, or made to sleep on a damp floor as a reminder that life itself is labor. The nobles are not exempt, though their labor takes different forms. Sons of noble families train as scribes, priests, or warriors. Their boys are filled with memorizing rituals, practicing speeches, or learning to fight with makuahil blades. For them, the work is mental and martial, but it is no less grueling. To fail in lessons is to shame their lineage, to risk losing the privilege of leadership. Work in the Aztec Empire is not only constant, it is communal. You do not labor for yourself alone. You labor for your kalpuli, your neighborhood group, which owes tribute to higher lords, who in turn serve the emperor. Each man and woman belongs to this chain, and the failure of one household can bring dishonor upon all. Imagine standing beside your neighbors, hauling stones or digging canals, under the gaze of officials who record every effort. There is no escape from collective responsibility. And work does not end when the sun goes down. At festivals, at markets, at rituals, ordinary people are pressed into service. They sweep temple courtyards before ceremonies. They carry supplies for armies marching to war. They prepare food and drink for nobles and priests. Even when you rest at night, your mind is restless, calculating the next day's obligations, the tribute still owed, the debts still unpaid. And hovering over all of this labor is the certainty of tribute. Whatever you produce, a portion belongs not to you, but to the state. Maize, beans, cotton, fish, salt, everything is tallied and extracted by officials. Failure to meet your quota can mean punishment, confiscation of land, public humiliation, even slavery. You work not only to feed yourself, but to feed the vast machinery of empire, a system that demands and consumes without mercy. Imagine the exhaustion at day's end. Your hands ache, your body slumps, yet tomorrow promises no reprieve. You collapse on a woven mat, your stomach filled with little more than tortillas and beans, your mind already heavy with the next day's tasks. There is no weekend, no holiday free of duty. Even festival days, while joyful, demand preparation, cooking, and service. Rest is fleeting, almost illusory. For a modern visitor, the sheer relentlessness of this labor would crush you within days. Your back would ache beyond repair, your hands blister and bleed. You would long for leisure, for a moment of choice. But here, there is none. To live in the Aztec Empire is to work from birth until death, your sweat woven into the fabric of society, your strength consumed until nothing remains. And yet, the Aztecs accepted this without question. Labor was not only survival, it was sacred. Labor fed the gods. Labor upheld the empire. Labor ensured that the sun would rise and the world endure. To refuse labor was to defy not just lords, but the very cosmos itself. This is why you would not last a day in the Aztec Empire. For here, every breath is bound to duty, every muscle pressed into service, every moment of life measured by how much sweat you pour into the earth. The Aztec Empire was magnificent in its artistry, its temples, its gardens, and its rituals. But beneath all the splendor lay a truth both simple and unforgiving. Food was scarce, and hunger was constant. Life in this world was balanced on the edge of a maize kernel. For maize, corn, was not only the foundation of the Aztec diet, it was the very foundation of existence. To eat in this empire was to participate in a sacred covenant, a fragile contract between people, gods, and the land. Imagine rising at dawn after a day of relentless labor. Your stomach growls even before your body moves, because you are always a little hungry. On the reed mat beside you lies a basket of tortillas, wrapped in cloth to keep them from hardening overnight. They are thin, simple, made from maize that has been boiled with lime water to release its nutrients. This nixtamalization process, discovered by Mesoamerican peoples long before the Aztecs, prevents malnutrition. Without it, diseases like pellagra would ravage communities. Yet even with this sacred knowledge, food is never abundant, never enough to make you truly full. Breakfast is meager, perhaps 2 tortillas and a smear of beans. If you are lucky, a sprinkle of chili adds heat, not just for flavor but to distract from the monotony. Chili peppers are everywhere, in soups, sauces, stews, because they mask the thinness of the meal. Without chili, life tastes like the endless grind of maize alone. For nobles and warriors, breakfast might include tamales stuffed with squash blossoms or meat. But for you, the commoner, it is usually tortillas and beans, day after day, a rhythm of hunger disguised as sustenance. At midday, after hours of work, you pause again to eat. Perhaps a thin atole, a warm maize porridge, flavored with honey if fortune smiles, but more often with nothing but water. You gulp it down quickly, returning to the fields or workshops, your stomach barely satisfied. For most, meat is a rare dream. Wild game exists, deer, rabbits, ducks, but these are luxuries, hunted with difficulty and often restricted by tribute demands. Fish and waterfowl from the lakes are more common, but still not enough to fill the bellies of a vast and growing city. Protein comes in stranger forms. Insects roasted on hot stones, grasshoppers ground into meal, water boatman eggs harvested from the lakes dried into cakes called ahuatle, sometimes called Mexican caviar. Spirulina algae scraped from the surface of the lakes is dried into green cakes rich with nutrients. These foods sustain you, yet they carry none of the indulgent weight of meat or dairy. They are survival foods, ingenious but lean, leaving hunger always just behind your ribs. At night, the household gathers again for tortillas, beans, perhaps a gourd of pumpkin seeds or a stew of squash and tomatoes. If you are fortunate, you taste turkey, one of the few domesticated animals of the Aztec world, its flesh roasted and flavored with chilies and herbs. But such moments are rare, saved for festivals or tributes. Most nights you chew the same coarse tortillas and beans, swallowing with gulps of water or thin pulque, a fermented drink made from maguey sap. Hunger is not just an inconvenience here, it is a constant shadow. Crops fail, drought strikes, floods overwhelm. When the harvest is thin, famine spreads like smoke. People grind not only maize, but acorns, weeds, even ground bark into flour. Families eat what they must, their stomachs twisting with the bitterness of survival foods. In the harshest years, entire villages weaken. The empire has food stores, but distribution favors the nobles, the warriors, the priests. The common people suffer first and longest. Yet maize is more than food, it is sacred. The god Tenochtitlan, deity of maize, is honored with rituals and offerings, his effigies clothed in corn husks. Children learn from birth that maize is life itself. Dropping even a single kernel carelessly is an offense, an insult to the gods. Every tortilla is made with reverence, even when eaten without joy. Maize is not only your body's sustenance, but your soul's connection to the divine. Still, hunger gnaws at you. You labor endlessly, your body sweating under the sun, and the food you eat fuels only survival, never abundance. Nobles feast on tamales stuffed with meat, on cacao drinks whipped into froth, on exotic fruits brought from tribute provinces. You, meanwhile, chew dry tortillas and swallow thin beans, your hunger dulled but never gone. Imagine the toll of this diet on your body. Your stomach never truly rests. Your teeth wear down from grinding kernels embedded with traces of stone dust from the metate. Your bones ache from labor fueled by meager calories. Illness lurks at the edges, your immune system weakened by lack of variety. And yet, somehow you endure. Because everyone does. Because the empire runs on hunger as much as it runs on maize. For a modern visitor, this life would be unthinkable. To live on little more than maize and beans, with meat a rare luxury, with insects and algae as daily staples, your body would rebel. You would grow faint, your energy collapse under the weight of labor unsupported by nutrition. You would crave salt, fat, sweetness, all in short supply. Hunger would follow you into sleep, into dreams, reminding you that in this empire, food is never guaranteed. And yet the Aztecs accepted this hunger as natural, even necessary. To eat was not about indulgence, but about survival and sacrifice. Every kernel of maize was a gift of the gods, every meal a fragile blessing. Hunger itself was a teacher, a reminder of humanity's dependence on divine favor. This is why you would not last a day in the Aztec Empire. Hunger is the empire's constant drumbeat, pounding through every stomach, reminding every person that life is borrowed from the gods, sustained only by maize and sacrifice. You would sit with your thin tortillas, your handful of beans, your bitter porridge, and your body would cry out for more. But in this empire, there is no more. There's only maize, only hunger, only the endless prayer that tomorrow the sun will rise and the fields will yield once again. If you were born into the Aztec Empire, your childhood would not be soft. It would not be padded with toys, gentle words, or idle days of play. From the very moment you opened your eyes, you were woven into a world of discipline, expectation, and preparation for the harsh realities of life. Childhood here was not an extended dream. It was an apprenticeship for survival in a society where every hand was needed, and where failure to meet expectations could bring shame not only upon yourself, but upon your entire family. Imagine yourself as a small child in the bustling heart of Tenochtitlan. The city hums around you, markets alive with vendors shouting prices, temples looming with smoke and chants, canals rippling with canoes. And yet, your world is much smaller. Your first memories are of your family's one-room home, the warmth of a hearth, the scratch of reed mats under your feet. But even in these tender years, life is demanding. From infancy, you are treated not as a possession of your parents, but as a gift entrusted by the gods. Your umbilical cord, once cut, is buried with ceremony. For boys, it is often placed in a battlefield or among weapons, signifying a life of warfare and duty. For girls, it is buried near the hearth, tying their destiny to the heart of the household. Even your very body is mapped with expectation before you can walk. As you grow, your education begins almost immediately. There are no toys in the sense you might imagine, but you play with miniature tools, tiny weaving sticks, small bows, little clay pots, each crafted to accustom your hands to the work that awaits you. Through play, you are rehearsing your future. A boy learns to throw miniature spears at targets. A girl practices grinding maize with a child-sized metate. These games are not for amusement, they are lessons wrapped in play. But the Aztecs were not indulgent parents. Discipline was considered as essential as food, and children were corrected firmly and frequently. To grow lazy, disobedient, or disrespectful was to risk becoming a burden to the household, and worse, an offense to the gods. Mothers and fathers did not hesitate to use physical punishments. If you were unruly, your parents might prick your body with maguey thorns, a sharp sting meant to remind you of humility. If you lied, your face might be rubbed with chili peppers until your eyes watered and your skin burned. These punishments were not seen as cruelty, but as correction, necessary measures to carve you into a useful adult. Children who continued to disobey could face harsher lessons. A boy who refused to work might be forced to inhale the smoke of burning chili peppers until his lungs seared. A girl who shirked her household duties might have her hair cut short, a public mark of shame. These methods were meant not to destroy the child, but to remind them of their place in the cosmic order. Discipline, like hunger, was constant, a reminder that life was fragile and survival required obedience. Education was universal in the Aztec Empire, one of the few societies of the ancient world to insist that all children attend school, regardless of class. But before that, much of your childhood training came from home. Boys were trained by fathers in farming, fishing, or craft, depending on the family's occupation. Girls learned from mothers how to cook, weave, grind maize, and tend the household altar. Every act was infused with ritual significance. To grind maize was not only labor, but participation in the sacred cycle of life itself. By the age of 6 or 7, your formal schooling would begin. For noble children, there was the Palmekok, where you were trained for priesthood, leadership, or warfare. For commoners, the Telpachkali, or the House of Youth, where you would be hardened for a life of service, labor, or soldiering. But even before entering these institutions, your childhood was already steeped in expectation. Every step was a preparation, every moment of play a rehearsal, every punishment a lesson. Even your games reflected this seriousness. You might play Patoli, a gambling game of beans and painted mats, learning strategy and the role of fate. Or you might toss balls in the early form of ulamilistli, the sacred ball game, understanding that play could carry the weight of religion and politics. Children's laughter existed, of course, but it was always shaped by the shadows of discipline and duty. Yet it would be wrong to imagine Aztec childhood as joyless. There was affection, too. Parents sang lullabies, grandparents told stories of gods and heroes, siblings played together in the courtyards. Festivals provided moments of levity, with dancing, feasting, and rituals where children wore costumes and joined parades. Even discipline, though harsh, was tempered with the knowledge that a strong child was a family's pride and a community's hope. Still, compared to modern childhood, the Aztec version would crush most outsiders. The sharp sting of chilly punishments, the expectation of labor by age 5, and the ever-present demand for obedience to family and gods, you would not last a day. Your soft upbringing would crumble under the weight of constant duty. Every mistake would be corrected swiftly, every disobedience marked on your skin or burned into your lungs. To grow up Aztec was to learn, from the first breath, that life was never truly your own. You belonged to your family, your city, your empire, and your gods. Childhood was not a sanctuary, but a forge, and in its fires, every child was hardened into a tool, whether farmer, soldier, priest, or mother, for the survival of the empire. If you were born male in the Aztec Empire, your path was written before you could even speak. You were destined for war. Not everyone would rise to the rank of eagle or jaguar warrior, but every boy was trained to fight, to endure pain, and to bring captives home for sacrifice. The empire thrived on conquest and ritual blood, and so every youth was shaped into a soldier long before he could wield a true weapon. Imagine yourself at the age of 15, standing at the threshold of the Telpochcalli, the House of Youth. The building looms near the center of your Kelpuli, your neighborhood, its walls painted with murals of gods and warriors. This is not a school of books and gentle lessons, it is a crucible. Here you will be broken down, hardened, and reforged into something capable of serving the Empire's hunger for battle. Your days begin before dawn, roused by stern instructors who were veterans themselves. There is no sleeping late, no excuses. You rise in the dark, your body still aching from the previous day's drills, and step into the cold air. The first lesson is always discipline, sweeping courtyards, hauling water, carrying firewood. These tasks are not punishment, but training, for the Aztecs believed that labor built endurance and humility, the very qualities a soldier needed most. After chores, the real instruction begins. You are taught how to march in formation, how to wield a wooden sword edged with obsidian blades, the deadly macohuitl. At first it feels awkward, the heavy wood clumsy in your hands, the obsidian catching the morning light. You swing, stumble, and are corrected with sharp words, or sometimes blows from your teachers. Precision is demanded. Hesitation is punished. You are not being trained to simply fight. You are being trained to kill and capture with ritual exactness. Every strike is taught with rhythm, every stance infused with ritual meaning. War is not chaos for the Aztecs, it is sacred order. You are not taught to slaughter indiscriminately, but to subdue, to take captives alive, for their blood is destined for the temples. Killing is acceptable, but capturing is glorious. A boy who could capture enemies rose in rank, bringing honor to his family and paving the way to elite warrior societies. But to reach that glory, you endure endless drills. You run barefoot across sharp volcanic stone, your feet bleeding. You carry heavy logs on your back, stumbling under their weight as older boys jeer, reminding you that weakness is shameful. You practice throwing spears with the atlatl, your arm aching from repetition. And when you collapse, the instructors drive you to rise again, reminding you that a warrior who falls in training is a corpse in battle. Punishments are harsh, for discipline must be absolute. If you are caught shirking chores or failing in drills, you may be beaten with sticks, pricked with maguey thorns, or forced to inhale burning chili smoke until your lungs scream. These punishments are not meant to break you, but to strip away softness, to leave only the hard shell of obedience. To outsiders, it would seem brutal, unbearable, but to the Aztecs it was necessary. A boy not hardened by pain could never face the horrors of war. Yet war training was not only physical. You are also steeped in ritual, taught the prayers and songs that must accompany battle. Each weapon has a spirit, each action a meaning. To charge into war without prayer was to risk defeat, for the gods fought alongside you. Instructors recite the names of deities like Huitzilopochtli, the sun god of war, reminding you that your very blood belongs to him. When you swing your weapon, it is not your arm alone, but the arm of the gods themselves. By the age of 17, you are sent on your first campaign. Imagine leaving Tenochtitlan with hundreds of warriors, drums beating, banners fluttering, the city watching proudly. You are terrified, your heart pounding, but you cannot show fear. The older warriors march with grim confidence, painted with jaguar spots or eagle feathers, their armor gleaming. You carry your obsidian-edged sword, your round shield painted with the colors of your Kalpuli, and the weight of expectation heavy on your shoulders. Battle is chaos, screams, drums, the clash of obsidian on wood, the rush of bodies colliding. You try to remember your training, to hold your ground, to strike as you were taught, but the reality overwhelms you. The faces of enemies painted in terrifying designs, the smoke of burning fields, the cries of the wounded. You stumble, nearly fall, but then your instructors' voices echo in your mind. Capture, not kill. You lunge, grapple, pin an enemy to the ground. If you are lucky, your comrades help bind him, dragging him alive from the field. In that moment, you are no longer a boy. You are a warrior. If you succeed in bringing home a captive, your status changes forever. Songs are sung in your honor. Feasts are held. You are allowed to wear the distinctive costumes of young warriors, feathers and bright colors proclaiming your achievement. You walk taller, for you have proven your worth not only to your family, but to the gods themselves. But failure is equally remembered. If you return without a captive, you are shamed, mocked, reminded that you are still unproven. Your teachers make you work harder, punish you more severely, until you prove yourself. And if you die in battle before capturing anyone, your soul does not ascend to the highest honors. The Aztecs believed that only warriors who captured enemies, or died while capturing them, were assured a place in the paradise of the sun. To fail in this was to risk becoming nothing more than dust. Would you last a day in the Tenochtitlan? Would you survive the bleeding feet, the smoke-filled lungs, the endless drills, the humiliation of failure? Would you march to war with only a wooden sword and obsidian blades, knowing that your enemies would try to kill you while you were expected to capture them alive? For most of us today, the answer is clear. We would collapse in the first drill, choke on the first punishment, falter in the first clash of battle. For the Aztec youth, though, this was life. This was destiny. From childhood to adolescence to manhood, the path was relentless, carved into every muscle, every scar, every dream. And so the boy became a warrior, not by choice, but by the unbreakable demands of a society that fed itself on war. If you think life as a man in the Aztec Empire was relentless, prepare yourself for the equally grueling, yet very different realities faced by women. To the Aztecs, men and women were considered two halves of the same cosmic whole. Men brought captives for sacrifice, and women brought forth life. Both roles were sacred, both were honored, and both were brutally demanding. Imagine yourself born female in Tenochtitlan, the jewel of the empire, surrounded by shimmering canals and towering temples. Your first cries would be met not with gentle lullabies, but with prayers and symbolic rituals. Midwives who attended your birth would cut the umbilical cord with obsidian blades, then bury it near the family hearth. Why? Because your destiny was tied to the home, the kitchen, and the weaving loom. Just as boys' cords were buried in the battlefield to signify their future in war, yours was planted in the hearth to mark your role in sustaining the household flame. From childhood, your life was filled with labor. At the age when modern children play, you were expected to carry water from canals in heavy clay jars, grind maize on a metate until your arms ached, and help tend younger siblings. Every day began before dawn with the sound of pounding maize stones echoing across neighborhoods as women prepared tortillas for their families. You would grow up with the sound in your ears, your muscles shaped by endless grinding, your skin hardened by sun and smoke. Education, too, was part of your life, though very different from the training boys received. At the Telpochkali, boys learned discipline and war, while girls attended the Kuikakali, the house of song. Here you were taught hymns, ritual dances, and proper manners. If you were destined for temple service, you might be trained in religious chants, weaving sacred garments, or tending temple fires. But for most girls, the focus was domestic: how to grind maize properly, how to weave textiles, how to manage a household, and above all, how to prepare for marriage. Marriage was not a personal choice, but a family arrangement woven into the web of alliances that held the Aztec social fabric together. When you reached the age of 14 or 15, your parents and elders began seeking a husband through matchmakers known as Teotihuacan. These women negotiated dowries, consulted omens, and arranged ceremonies. On your wedding day, you would be richly dressed in woven garments, your face painted, your hair adorned with ribbons. A fire would be lit, symbolizing your new household, and you and your husband's cloaks would be tied together in the ritual of union. The marriage was binding, the duties clear. He would go to war, and you would sustain the home. But this role was no simple domestic quietude. Your daily life was relentless labor. Dawn began with grinding maize for tortillas, sweeping the home and courtyard, tending small gardens called chinampas, and weaving cloth on backstrap looms. Weaving was not just a skill, but a sacred duty, for textiles were essential to both family survival and tribute to the empire. Every thread you wove was part of the empire's economy, part of the chain of obligations that tied households to the state. Childbirth, however, was the greatest trial and the greatest danger. For Aztec women, giving birth was considered the female equivalent of war. You were a warrior of the womb, and childbirth was your battlefield. Midwives shouted battle cries during labor, encouraging you as if you were charging an enemy. And indeed, many did not survive this battle. Death in childbirth was common, and women who perished were honored as fallen warriors, their spirits believed to escort the sun across the sky. But the fear was ever present. Each pregnancy was both a promise and a peril, a moment of hope shadowed by death. Even when children survived, the burden did not end. Infant mortality was high, and mothers were responsible for safeguarding children through endless labor and ritual. You whispered protective prayers over their cradles, hung amulets of maize or obsidian near their beds, and taught them songs to ward off evil spirits. Each night you fell asleep exhausted, knowing you would rise again before dawn to repeat the cycle. Yet women were not powerless. Some became priestesses, midwives, or even healers skilled in herbal medicine. Others were traders in the markets, dealing in cloth, food, or luxury goods, their voices loud in the bustling squares. Noble women wielded influence through marriages, forging alliances between powerful families. And goddesses like Coatlicue, Tonantzin, and Tlazolteotl reminded everyone that female power was cosmic, creative, and terrifying in equal measure. Still, for the majority, life was backbreaking and short. Would you survive as an Aztec woman? Could you rise before dawn each day to grind maize for hours, weave cloth until your fingers blistered, and bear the constant threat of childbirth as a life or death struggle? Could you labor endlessly, only to watch your children risk being claimed by disease or sacrifice? The truth is stark. Most of us today, cushioned by modern medicine, convenience, and personal choice, would not last. But for Aztec women, endurance is not optional. It was survival. Every tortilla, every woven cloth, every child carried forward the empire. Without them, there would be no warriors, no sacrifices, no Tenochtitlan shining on the waters. The Aztec Empire was built not only on the obsidian swords of its men, but on the weary, calloused hands of its women. If you thought life in the Aztec Empire was all about war and ritual, think again. Behind the grand temples and dazzling ceremonies was an economy that had to feed hundreds of thousands of people. And at the center of that economy were markets, tribute systems, and endless obligations that made daily survival as heavy a burden as any obsidian sword. Picture yourself walking through the bustling Tlatelolco marketplace, the largest in the empire, just north of the twin capital Tenochtitlan. The square stretches wide and orderly, laid out with stalls like a checkerboard. The sound is overwhelming, merchants shouting prices, children tugging at mothers' skirts, the clatter of clay pots, the squeal of turkeys, the rustle of woven mats. The air smells of roasted maize, cacao, and the pungent tang of chili peppers. By some estimates, more than 60,000 people gathered here daily, exchanging goods that stretched from the Gulf Coast to the highland valleys, from Oaxaca to the distant Maya lands. You marvel at the sheer variety, bright feathers of quetzals and parrots, jaguar pelts, obsidian blades, salt cakes, cacao beans, fish carried from coastal towns still glistening in baskets of rushes, cotton cloth, pottery, honey, maguey fiber ropes, rubber balls, and medicinal herbs. It feels like a world bazaar, alive with voices and colors. And yet, for most, this was not a place of leisure. It was necessity. Markets, where survival was negotiated, where you bartered to stretch your tribute obligations, where the line between subsistence and hunger was drawn thin. Because at the heart of Aztec life was tribute. Every household, every conquered city, every province was bound to provide goods to the empire. Tenochtitlan's splendor was not built only by its warriors, but by the relentless flow of tribute extracted from subject peoples. Conquered towns sent maize, beans, amaranth, cacao, cotton, sandals, cloaks, honey, salt, fish, obsidian, and sometimes even human captives. Records carved in codices showed mountains of goods streaming in like rivers of obligation. Imagine the pressure. Your family grows maize, but before you can feed your own children, the tribute collectors arrive. They demand a set amount, measured in baskets or bundles. Failed to deliver, and punishment could be severe. Beatings, confiscation, even slavery. Your survival depends not only on your harvest, but on your ability to meet quotas that feel endless. The empire's brilliance rested on this constant extraction, a system that rewarded the elite while pressing the common people to the edge. Markets helped balance this burden, but they were no paradise. Everything had a price, and the primary currency was cacao beans and cotton cloth. A few beans might buy you a handful of chili peppers, while a rabbit cost a cloak. But watch carefully. Counterfeit beans were common. Hollow shells filled with dirt or shaved beans glued back together. Market judges patrolled the stalls, ready to punish cheaters. Theft, fraud, or disorder in the market could be met with swift justice, even death. The strain was not only economic, but physical. Picture yourself as a porter, a tlemem, bent beneath the weight of tribute bundles. With no beasts of burden, every load was carried on human backs. Straps across foreheads cut into skin as men trudged miles along causeways and roads, bearing baskets of maize and foray of water or stacks of firewood. You would feel every step, every ache, knowing that you carried not just goods, but the weight of imperial expectation. Women, too, bore the economic burden. Your woven textiles were as valuable as maize, demanded by tribute officials and sold in markets. Hours bent over a backstrap loom, your eyes straining and fingers raw, were not for personal gain, but for obligations set by rulers you never met. Failure was unthinkable. Survival depended on relentless productivity. And beyond the daily grind was the fear of famine. The Valley of Mexico's soil was rich, but harvests were uncertain. A few years of drought or floods could turn markets desperate, prices soaring beyond reach. In such years, tribute demands did not lessen. Instead, people starved, some selling themselves or their children into slavery to survive. The market was life, the tribute system was law, and together they pressed constantly against the people who sustained the empire. Could you survive the endless cycle of grinding maize, weaving cloth, carrying loads, and paying tribute while still feeding your own family? Could you stand in the market day after day, bartering for beans to keep hunger from your door, always under the eyes of officials and judges, ready to punish even small mistakes? The grandeur of Tenochtitlan, the glittering temples, the shimmering canals, The warriors in feathered costumes was built on this strain, on the daily sacrifices of thousands who bent their backs beneath the empire's weight. Would you last a day here? Perhaps in wonder, yes. But in labor? In endless obligation? In the relentless pressure of tribute and survival? The truth is, few of us today would. If you were a child in the Aztec Empire, your life wasn't carefree. Childhood was short, and responsibility arrived early. From the moment you could walk, you were expected to work, fetching water, carrying firewood, grinding maize, weaving cloth, helping in the fields, and when you were old enough, school awaited you. Not a place of play and discovery, but a place of discipline, labor, and preparation for the role society demanded you fulfill. Unlike in many ancient civilizations, education in the Aztec Empire was mandatory for everyone, boys and girls, nobles and commoners alike. On the surface, this seems enlightened, but for those living it, schooling was less about personal growth and more about obedience, endurance, and preparing to sacrifice for the community and the gods. Imagine yourself as a 10-year-old boy, nervous on your first day. If you're the son of a noble, you're sent to the Kalmekak, the school for elite children, often attached to a temple. If you're the child of a commoner, you go to the Telpochkali, the house of the youth. Both schools were strict, but their purposes differed. In the Telpochkali, you'd be trained primarily to serve as a warrior. You would sweep temple courtyards, carry firewood for priests, and work in fields for your community. Much of your education was physical, hardening your body through long marches, fasting, and exposure to cold. You'd sleep on hard mats, wake at dawn, and practice carrying loads until your shoulders burned. The goal wasn't comfort, but endurance. You were being shaped into a soldier who could withstand hunger, exhaustion, and fear on the battlefield. In the Kalmekak, life was equally harsh, but focused on producing priests, administrators, and military leaders. Discipline was even stricter. You rose before dawn, bathed in cold water, prayed, and studied sacred hymns, astronomy, calendars, and rituals. Fasting was frequent, punishments severe. Misbehavior might earn you beatings, pricking with cactus spines, or being forced to inhale chili smoke until your eyes burned and you choked. These were not considered cruel, but necessary. To serve the gods required purity, strength, and unwavering will. Girls, too, were educated, though their training focused on weaving, food preparation, household management, and religious duties. They were taught modesty, obedience, and endurance. But don't mistake this for an easy life. Their work was relentless, their responsibilities heavy. From weaving intricate textiles to preparing offerings, they carried the weight of sustaining both family and empire. The lessons weren't limited to classrooms. Education was woven into every moment of life. At home, parents enforced discipline with the same severity as teachers. If a child disobeyed, they might have their face smeared with chili, be forced to inhale its smoke, or pricked with thorns. The message was clear. Life was hard, and only discipline could prepare you for it. Beyond punishment, there were constant lessons in humility. You were reminded daily that arrogance was dangerous. Nobles and commoners alike were taught to lower their eyes when addressing elders, to speak softly, to accept hardship without complaint. Boasting was condemned. Humility was survival. Now, imagine the mental strain of this environment. Every day was regimented, every action weighed, every mistake punished. You weren't taught to dream or explore, but to endure, obey, and prepare for a life of service and sacrifice. Modern students might complain about exams or homework, but in the Aztec Empire, failure could mean public humiliation, physical pain, or lifelong dishonor. And yet, beneath this harshness, there was structure and purpose. The Aztecs believed education was the foundation of social order. Without discipline, society would collapse. Without training, warriors could not defend the empire. Without knowledge of rituals and calendars, the balance of the cosmos itself could fail. Education wasn't about personal ambition, it was about survival. For you, your family, and your people. Would you last a day in an Aztec school? Perhaps you could endure the first hours, listening to chants, sweeping courtyards, carrying wood. But when the punishments came, when your stomach growled from fasting, when your body ached from endless drills, when your spirit wilted under constant discipline, could you endure it day after day, year after year? For Aztec children, there was no choice. This was their world, a childhood forged in hardship, shaped into obedience, and prepared for a future of sacrifice. To them, it was normal. To us, it feels unrelenting. If you were a young man in the Aztec Empire, your future was written in blood. From the moment you entered the Tenochtitlan, or Comicok, your path was shaped toward the battlefield. War was not simply a matter of defense or conquest, it was the lifeblood of the empire, the engine that fed the gods, upheld the state, and defined your worth as a man. For the Aztecs, to fight was to live, and to capture enemies was to serve both emperor and eternity. Imagine yourself at 17, standing in the courtyard of your school as the sun rises over Tenochtitlan. You wear a simple cotton tunic, your hair bound tightly, your body lean from years of fasting, marching, and training. Today, you join your first campaign. Priests smear your face with black paint, marking you for battle. Elders give short speeches, reminders that your life belongs to the gods, that honor is found not in survival, but in service. You march with thousands of others, drums pounding like the heartbeat of the earth. Your weapons are simple but deadly. The maquaitl, a wooden sword edged with obsidian blades, sharp enough to sever a man's limb. A small round shield of wood and hide. Darts for your atlotl, the spear thrower that hurls missiles with terrifying force. Beside you march veterans, their cloaks marked with symbols of captives taken. You have none yet. Without captives, you are nothing. Because in the Aztec world, killing an enemy outright was not the highest honor. Capturing them alive was. Every prisoner you dragged back from battle became an offering to the gods. To capture was to feed the sun itself, to keep the universe alive. To kill carelessly was wasteful. To return empty-handed was shameful. The fighting was brutal. Imagine charging into enemy ranks, facing warriors from Tlaxcala or Huexotzenco, shields clashing, obsidian blades flashing in the sun. The battlefield was a chaos of screams, drums, and whistles. Dust rose around you, choking your throat, stinging your eyes. The heat of the valley's sun beat down on your back as you swung your weapon, obsidian shards glinting like fire. But unlike in modern wars, your task wasn't to cut down as many as possible. You aimed to disable, not kill. A slash to the legs to topple your opponent. A blow with the flat of the blade to stun him. Then, with the help of comrades, you dragged him away, his arms bound, his body struggling. Each captive became a mark of honor, a step upward in the warrior's ranks. 4 prisoners could elevate you to the status of jaguar or eagle warrior, the elite orders who wore dazzling feathered costumes and sat in councils of war. Failure was crushing. If you returned from battle without a captive, you faced ridicule. Your teachers would shame you. Your family might look at you with disappointment. Worse, you might be forced to endure mockery in ceremonies where captives stood taller than you, honored for their fate while you remained ordinary. For the Aztecs, war was not just a duty, it was the arena of manhood, the stage upon which your value was tested. And war was constant. Campaigns launched not only against enemies, but against longtime rivals who existed for the very purpose of providing captives. These were the Xochiaoyot, the Flower Wars, ritual battles fought not for territory, but for blood. Imagine knowing that your enemy did not come to conquer your land, but to capture your body, drag you to their city, and offer you to their gods. Every warrior carried this dual awareness. You fought not only to capture, but to avoid being captured. The stakes were not simply victory or defeat, but survival and sacrifice. Prisoners endured brutal fates. Captured warriors were paraded through Tenochtitlan, mocked and displayed, yet they were also treated with a strange respect, for they were destined to climb the temple steps, hearts offered to the gods, their deaths fueling the cycle of the sun. Some captives faced gladiatorial combat, tied to a stone platform, given a dull weapon, forced to fight against fully armed warriors until they collapsed in exhaustion. Others were sacrificed in elaborate rituals tied to festivals, embodying gods themselves before their hearts were cut out. And as you, the Aztec warrior, stood watching such ceremonies, you were reminded this could be you. Tomorrow, on another battlefield, you might be the one bound, painted, mocked, and sacrificed. The line between captor and captive was razor thin, and every campaign tested whether you would rise in honor or fall in disgrace. The life of the warrior was not glamorous. It was hunger, exhaustion, terror, and relentless pressure. You were not fighting to enrich yourself. Your rewards were meager, perhaps a cloak, a feather, a little more prestige at the banquet table. The true reward was spiritual, the knowledge that you had served the gods. But for your body, the price was heavy. You might march for days with no food but maize cakes, no drink but thin pulque. You might sleep on the bare ground wrapped in nothing but your cloak, your ears ringing with the cries of the wounded. Would you last a day in this life? Perhaps you could swing the sword once or twice, feel the thrill of combat, even drag an enemy a few steps. But could you endure weeks of marching, the shame of returning empty-handed, the terror of knowing capture meant your death? For the Aztecs, this was not hypothetical, it was daily reality. Their empire was built on warriors, sustained by captives, and fueled by sacrifice. Every young man bore this weight, every battle carried these stakes. To us, it feels unbearable. To them, it was simply the cost of keeping the sun alive. In the Aztec Empire, captivity was not the end of war, it was its true purpose. To capture was to fulfill the gods' demand for blood and hearts. A captive's fate was not execution in some quiet corner, but sacrifice in the center of the city, before thousands, beneath the shadow of temples that rose like mountains of stone. If war was the lifeblood of the empire, sacrifice was its heartbeat. Imagine yourself bound with ropes of maguey fiber, your hands tied behind your back. You have been dragged for days through the valley, stumbling on stone roads while jeering warriors tug you along. You are fed just enough to keep you alive, for your body has only one purpose now, to climb the temple steps and be offered to the gods. When you finally reach Tenochtitlan, the city itself overwhelms you. Canals cut through neighborhoods like silver threads. Markets teem with tens of thousands of people. Towers and temples gleam with painted colors. At the center, rising above all, is the Templo Mayor, its twin shrines crowned with smoke. Here, before the gods Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc, you will meet your fate. But you are not thrown to your death in secret. Sacrifice is theater, a performance staged for the empire. The streets echo with drums, conch shells, and the rattle of dancers' ankle bells. Priests, their skins smeared black with soot, their hair matted with blood, lead you in procession. Feathers flash, incense rises, and the city gathers in the plaza to watch. You are no longer just a man. You are part of a spectacle that unites religion, politics, and the very cosmos. The climb up the temple steps is brutal. Stone rises steeply, each stair a jagged tooth cutting into your bare feet. Spectators shout below, some mocking, others awed, all knowing they too depend on your sacrifice. For if the gods are not fed, the sun itself might falter. At the top, the air thickens with copal smoke. 4 priests seize you, forcing you back against a great stone. Their hands are firm, practiced. They bind your arms and legs. The high priest steps forward, his obsidian blade glinting in the sun. He raises it high, his chant echoing across the city. In that moment, silence falls, tens of thousands holding their breath. The blade plunges into your chest, swift and merciless, splitting flesh and bone. Your heart is torn free, lifted skyward, still beating, a crimson offering to Huitzilopochtli. Blood pours down the steps, staining the temple red, a river running toward the plaza below. The crowd erupts in shouts, drums thunder, and the priest casts your heart into a burning brazier. Smoke rises upward, carrying your essence to the heavens. Your body, now lifeless, is tumbled down the steps, where it joins others in the courtyard. Some will be flayed, their skins worn by priests in macabre rituals. Others will be dismembered, their flesh cooked and eaten in ritual feasts that merge sacrament with sustenance. Cannibalism, though shocking to us, was to the Aztecs a way of embodying the god, of consuming divine essence. And yet, for all its brutality, sacrifice was not seen as cruelty. It was reciprocity. The gods had shed their own blood to create the world. Humans owed blood in return. Without it, crops would fail, the sun would dim, the stars would fall into chaos. To the Aztecs, each victim was a thread keeping the universe intact. To resist sacrifice was not only futile, it was cosmic treason. There were many kinds of sacrifices, each with its own meaning. Some captives were killed swiftly on the temple top. Others faced the gladiatorial stone where they fought armed champions until exhaustion overcame them. Some were chosen to impersonate gods, treated like kings for months before their final death. The youth who embodied Tezcatlipoca was adorned in jewels, feasted and worshipped as a living deity, until the appointed day when his throat was cut and his glory ended in blood. Women too were sacrificed, often in rites to fertility goddesses. Their hair was cut, their bodies adorned, their deaths believed to ensure the fertility of the earth. Children, their tears likened to rain, were offered to Tlaloc on mountaintops. The more they cried, the more abundant the rains would be. And always the people watched. Sacrifice was not hidden, it was staged to remind every citizen of their place in the cosmos. It terrified, awed, and inspired. For the warrior, it was a reminder of his duty. For the farmer, a reassurance that the sun would rise and the rains would come. For the captive, it was both doom and strange honor. To be chosen was to join the gods themselves. Could you endure such a world? Could you walk through a city where the smell of blood mingled with incense, where the steps of temples were forever stained dark? Could you raise your children knowing they might one day be marched in procession to feed the gods? The Aztecs did not flinch. They embraced sacrifice as necessity, as sacred truth. They lived in a world where every beating heart was a gift borrowed from the gods, destined to be returned. For them, the theater of death was not horror, but survival, the only way to keep the sun burning in the sky. The Aztec Empire was not simply a kingdom of warriors and bloodshed, it was a civilization that ordered time itself through ritual. Festivals were not mere celebrations, but cosmic reenactments. Each feast, each dance, each sacrifice was a way to renew creation, to replay the gods' struggles so that the world would not collapse. And at the heart of this system lay the sacred calendar, a web of cycles that dictated every offering, every fast, every death. Imagine the rhythm of the Aztec year, measured not by weeks but by sacred periods. Two calendars overlapped like gears, the Xihu-Pawali, the 365-day solar calendar, and the Tonal-Pawali, the 260-day ritual calendar. Together they formed a cycle that guided both daily life and the fate of empires. To be born on a certain day was not chance, it was destiny, written in the cosmic script. Each month of the solar year carried a festival, and each festival carried sacrifice. When the rains failed, the people turned to Tlaloc, god of water. They climbed mountains with children dressed in blue, their tears believed to summon the storms. When maize sprouted, they danced for Centeotl, god of corn, offering blood from their tongues and ears, planting life with life. When the war season came, the drums thundered for Huitzilopochtli, and captives filled the plazas with cries and prayers before their final moments. Step into the heart of Tenochtitlan during one of these festivals. The plaza before the Templo Mayor swells with tens of thousands of people, their faces painted, their hair adorned with feathers. The air is thick with copal smoke and the scent of roasted maize. Dancers whirl in circles, their ankle rattles echoing like rain on stone. Priests chant hymns written centuries before, words that retell creation's battles and plead with the gods to renew the cycle once more. One festival, Klakashipewalisli, was a spectacle of blood and renewal. Captives were forced to fight warriors on the gladiatorial stone, armed only with a wooden sword edged with feathers instead of obsidian. Exhausted, bleeding, they inevitably fell, their chests opened in sacrifice, their skins flayed and worn by priests who became living embodiments of the gods. For weeks after, these skins were carried through the streets, reminders that the earth itself was clothed in death to bring new life. Another, Panketsalitzli, honored Huitzilopochtli, the patron god of war. Entire days were filled with processions of banners, priests painted blue, and the sacrifice of hundreds of captives. The air rang with war chants, conch shells, and the relentless beat of drums. To witness this was not optional, it was a duty. Attendance bound the people together in awe, terror, and reverence. The festival was not entertainment, it was the reenactment of the gods' own wars against darkness. Every ritual tied the people to cosmic truth. To abstain from them was to step outside the rhythm of creation. Even children were taught early to fast during festivals, to pierce their skin with maguey thorns, to learn that sacrifice was not only for warriors or captives, but for everyone. Bloodletting was the daily sacrifice of nobles and priests, cutting tongues, ears, thighs, letting drops of blood fall into paper or into bowls, gifts to the gods who had bled to create the world. Death itself was not the end, but a transformation. The way you died determined your afterlife. Warriors slain in battle or sacrificed upon the temples ascended to the sky, following the sun on its journey. Women who died in childbirth joined them, revered as equal to fallen warriors. Children who drowned or died by water were carried to Tlalocan, the lush paradise of the rain god. Others drifted into Mitlan, the underworld, a place of trials where the soul traveled through rivers, mountains, and winds before reaching final peace. The festivals made these truths visible. When a warrior's body was paraded through the streets, the people saw not only his death but his transformation. When children's tears were offered to Tlaloc, the community saw not cruelty but necessity. Their tears became rain, their sacrifice a blessing upon the fields. These rituals held the empire together, reminding every farmer, artisan, and noble that their survival was stitched into the fabric of the gods' hunger. To live in such a world was to exist within an endless performance of cosmic drama. You could not simply rest, feast, or mourn without ritual. Every act was folded into the calendar, each season choreographed, each life measured in cycles of offering and renewal. Could you endure such relentless devotion? Could you live in a city where festivals demanded weeks of sacrifice, where every drumbeat reminded you that your blood or your child's might one day be poured onto the stones to keep the world alive? For the Aztecs, it was not horror but duty, not cruelty but balance. To them, ritual was survival. Without it, the world would unravel. For all the grandeur of pyramids, feathered headdresses, and gold, the backbone of the Aztec Empire was not luxury, it was labor. Most people were Masiwiltan, commoners bound to the soil, to tribute, and to survival. Their days were not filled with festivals or grand battles, but with sweat, hunger, and a constant struggle to meet the demands of empire. Imagine waking at dawn in a mud-brick home on the outskirts of Tenochtitlan. The floor is hard-packed earth, and your bed is a woven reed mat. Smoke lingers from the cooking fire, stinging your eyes as you rise to begin your work. Your first task, prepare a toli, a thin maize porridge for your family. There is no variety in your diet. Day after day, it is maize in some form, a toli, tortillas, tamales, supplemented by beans, squash, and occasionally chilies. Meat is rare, a luxury reserved for nobles or ceremonial feasts. Most protein comes from insects, grubs, or the occasional frog pulled from the canals. Hunger is a constant companion, sharpened by the demands of tribute. Every household owes a portion of its harvest to the state. Maize, beans, cotton, cacao, all are tallied by officials and carried into the heart of Tenochtitlan to feed nobles, priests, and the massive armies. To fall behind on tribute is dangerous. Punishments range from fines to enslavement. There is no safety net, no mercy in a bad harvest. If the rains fail, you still owe the same amount, even if your children starve. The work itself is endless. Men spend long hours in the fields, hacking at soil with wooden digging sticks tipped in obsidian, carrying water, and building terraces on hillsides. Women grind maize by hand on matates, kneeling for hours until their backs ache and their hands blister. Children help as soon as they can walk, fetching water, carrying wood, chasing pests from crops. Rest is rare, and leisure nearly non-existent. Even beyond farming, the empire pulls at you. Roads must be built, canals dug, temples raised. Commoners are conscripted into corvée labor, leaving their fields behind for weeks at a time to build the infrastructure that held the empire together. Each stone placed in the Templo Mayor was carried on the backs of thousands of men like you. Nobles gave orders, priests blessed the work, but the sweat and blood belonged to the Masiwilton. And then there is war. Every able-bodied man is expected to fight when called. It is not a choice, it is a duty. You march out under the banners of your kapuli, armed with a wooden club edged with obsidian blades. If you capture enemies alive, you might rise in status, but if you fail, you return home with nothing but shame. Many do not return at all. For the state, your life is expendable. For you, it is the only thing you own. The hardships of daily life extend into your home. Illness is constant. Without metal tools, medicine, or soap, infections spread easily. Diseases like dysentery, fevers, or skin lesions could wipe out entire families. Medicine comes in the form of herbs, prayers, and rituals performed by midwives and healers, but their power is limited. If you are poor, your body is your only wealth, and when it breaks, there is no safety. Marriage does not bring relief, but more labor. Women bear child after child, often dying young in childbirth. Men bend their backs in the fields until their bodies fail. Old age is rare. To be 40 is to be considered weathered, worn down by decades of tribute and toil. And yet there is resilience. Families laugh, sing, and tell stories. Children play in the canals. Communities gather to share food during festivals. Even in hardship, there is beauty. The scent of flowers in courtyards, the bright embroidery on simple cotton tunics, and the joy of watching a child take their first steps. These moments are brief, fragile, but they shine brightly against the grind of survival. Still, you wouldn't last a day in this world. To wake hungry, to work until your body aches, to hand over your harvest to officials, to face war at the emperor's command, this was not occasional misfortune, it was daily life. For the Masiwilton, existence was a burden carried together, each person bent beneath the weight of empire. If the fields and tribute sustained the Aztec Empire, it was the marketplace that gave it rhythm and life. No empire could survive on maize and conquest alone. It needed exchange, movement, and trade. Nowhere was this more visible than in the great market of Tlatelolco, the bustling twin city of Tenochtitlan. For commoners, nobles, and merchants alike, the market was not just a place to buy food or goods. It was the beating heart of Aztec society, a place where wealth, power, and culture converged. Picture yourself stepping into Tlatelolco's market at midday. The air is alive with voices. Tens of thousands of people crowd the square, men, women, children, nobles, warriors, and foreign merchants. Some estimates claim that on festival days, as many as 60,000 people gathered here, making it one of the largest markets in the world. The ground is divided into sections, each devoted to a different trade. Vendors squat behind mats piled with goods, shouting out their wares as buyers move from stall to stall. The variety is staggering. Here are baskets of maize, beans, chilies, and squash, their colors dazzling in the sun. There are live turkeys, dogs raised for meat, and cages filled with quails and ducks. Nearby, piles of cacao beans glisten in the light. Each bean more valuable than maize, used both as food and as currency. To your left, a merchant pours out salt, obsidian blades, and lime powder. To your right, a woman lays out textiles, soft cotton cloaks dyed in brilliant reds and blues. The air is rich with smells, freshly cooked tamales steaming in clay pots, the sharp bite of roasted chilies, the sweetness of honey, and the musk of animals penned for sale. Music drifts through the crowd as street performers sing and play flutes, hoping for a coin or two. The sounds are overwhelming, a tide of humanity pressing in from all sides. But beneath the chaos lies strict order. The market is regulated by officials known as Tlatelolco judges who patrol the grounds in pairs. They watch carefully for thieves, cheats, or those who try to disrupt the flow of trade. Punishments are swift: fines, confiscation, or even death for serious crimes. For all its noise and movement, the marketplace is a place of law where balance must be maintained. Trade itself is complex. Goods move not only within the city, but across the empire. Merchants known as Pochteca travel hundreds of miles, carrying exotic wares from distant lands. From the Gulf Coast come shells, feathers, and cacao. From the mountains come obsidian, jade, and precious stones. From the hot lowlands come cotton and rubber. The Pochteca are more than traders. They are spies for the state, reporting on the lands they pass through. They are both respected and distrusted, men who live on the edge of society's rules, yet essential to its wealth. For commoners, the market is both opportunity and burden. Here you can sell your surplus maize, woven mats, or clay pots. A few extra cacao beans might buy you chilies, fish, or even a small trinket to bring home to your children. But prices fluctuate and the market can be unforgiving. A bad harvest or sudden flood of goods can collapse value overnight. You may leave with less than you hoped, or worse, with nothing at all. The market is also where the empire's inequality becomes visible. Nobles arrive wearing feathered cloaks, escorted by servants who carry their purchases. They can afford jewelry, gold ornaments in cacao by the sack. Commoners, meanwhile, haggle for scraps of fish or a handful of chilies. Yet in this space, rich and poor mingle, united by the shared necessity of trade. The presence of barter adds another layer of challenge. Cacao beans are used as currency, but they are fragile, sometimes counterfeited by filling empty shells with dirt. Cotton cloaks are another standard of exchange, but they are heavy and cumbersome. Transactions require trust, negotiation, and sharp eyes. A single mistake can cost a family days of labor. And the market is not only for goods, services are traded as well. Healers offering herbal remedies, scribes writing letters on amate paper, diviners reading omens for a price. There are barbers, tattooists, even dentists pulling teeth with obsidian tools. The market is both an economic center and a cultural one, a place where you see the full spectrum of Aztec life. But for you, a stranger, this world would be overwhelming. The noise, the smells, the strict laws, the necessity of constant vigilance, you would not last an hour without offending a merchant, paying too much, or attracting the gaze of a market judge. To survive here requires sharpness, resilience, and the ability to navigate a society where every exchange carries risk. The Aztec marketplace is dazzling, yes, but it is also a reminder of the empire's demands. It is here that tribute is redistributed, that wealth is displayed, and that commoners feel both the weight of survival and the pulse of their world. For the Masiwaltan, the market is not a choice, it is life itself. And life in the Aztec Empire is never easy. By now, you've walked the streets of Tenochtitlan, felt the sun press down on the chinampas, heard the songs of priests echoing over pyramids, and tasted the heat of chilies on your tongue. You've witnessed the market's chaos, the burden of tribute, the demand for war, and the certainty of death. And perhaps you've begun to understand why you would never last a day in the Aztec Empire. But the truth is even sharper than discomfort, hunger, or fear. The Aztec world was built on a delicate balance between abundance and sacrifice, order and violence, beauty and terror. To live within it meant carrying the weight of an empire that asked everything from you and gave little in return. Imagine for a moment being a commoner born into this vast machine. From childhood, your path is marked: fields to till, taxes to pay, gods to appease. Your days are consumed with work, hauling water, grinding maize, weaving cloth, carrying tribute, standing in formation when the drums of war call. There is little rest, little choice, and little chance of change. Your survival depends not on ambition, but on submission, on accepting the endless demands of a society where your life is only one grain in the Empire's storehouse. Yet, within this harshness, there was also splendor. To stand on the causeway at dawn, watching the sun rise over the lakes and temples, was to feel awe at a city unlike any other. To hear the drums and conch shells of a festival was to be swept into a tide of energy that bound everyone together. The Aztec world was cruel, yes, but it was also magnificent, a civilization of art, poetry, engineering, and ritual, where life itself was woven into the rhythms of gods and stars. This duality was the essence of Aztec survival. Every tortilla eaten was a gift of the earth, but also the product of back-breaking labor. Every festival was a moment of joy, but also a reminder of the gods' hunger. Every triumph in war was celebrated, but also demanded the blood of captives. Beauty and brutality walked hand in hand. And this balance came at a cost. For the empire to shine, countless commoners bent their backs in toil. For the gods to be satisfied, captives lost their lives on temple steps. For markets to thrive, distant provinces were drained of tribute. For rulers to rule, farmers starved quietly in their villages. The greatness of the empire was built on the suffering of many, and each person knew that the cycle would never end. For an outsider, stepping into this world even for a day, the pressure would be unbearable. You would feel the hunger of meals that never filled you, the pain of carrying burdens that broke your shoulders, the fear of priests whose chants promised your death, the exhaustion of nights spent preparing for another day of labor. You would falter, stumble, and collapse under the weight of demands too vast, too unrelenting. The Aztecs themselves survived it only because they were born into it, hardened by it, shaped by centuries of ritual and necessity. And yet, they found meaning. They composed poems about flowers and jade, sung of love, loss, and the fleeting nature of life. They created art from feathers, gold, and stone. They built a city that astonished even the Spaniards who destroyed it. They endured, not because life was easy, but because endurance itself was sacred. As you stand at the edge of this empire in your imagination, looking back at the temples and markets, the fields and the causeways, you understand at last, the Aztec world was not built for comfort. It was built for survival, for sacrifice, for a vision of order upheld by blood and sweat. And for you, accustomed to the luxuries of the modern world, one day in this empire would be enough to break you. But for the Aztecs, it was life itself, the only life they knew, and the life they carried with fierce pride until the empire's final fall beneath the iron and fire of conquest. And so we close this journey, not with ease, but with respect. Respect for those who lived beneath the weight of an empire, both dazzling and merciless. Respect for their endurance, their creativity, their resilience in the face of demands few of us could ever meet. You wouldn't last a day in the Aztec Empire, but those who did left behind a civilization that still speaks across centuries, its pyramids rising, its poetry echoing, its history reminding us of both the brilliance and the cost of survival.